Welcome to the mid-year book freakout tag. If you're new here, my name's Sam. I'm a romance author and voracious reader, and today we are talking about first half of 2024, my year so far in reading, how it's going. I love this tag. I did it last year, and I'm really excited because there's a couple of books that I'm going to talk about, or at least one book that I'm going to talk about that I haven't talked about yet because I just read it. I have read 37 books so far in 2024. As of recording this, it is the 12th of June. I set myself a goal of 78 books for the year in like the Goodreads challenge, which is a book and a half a week. I expected I might exceed that when I said it, but I was trying to just be really gentle with my reading goals for the year. Demand avoidance problems. Having read 37 so far, that's 47% of my goal, and Goodreads tells me I am 3 books ahead of schedule. And yes, I know, I also hate Goodreads. I did a video a while back where I was trying some Goodreads alternatives, including Storygraph, and I didn't love it, but I've had a lot of requests to do an updated version of that video, so I will probably be doing that in the next couple of months. So if you want to see that, make sure that you're subscribed. But let's get into the book tag, shall we? So the first question in the book tag is the best book so far. And I am really excited to say that it is a book that I have just read, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I loved this book. This was almost a perfect book for me. I absolutely got that 5-star feeling. If you have not heard of Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, it is sort of a cozy fantasy, I guess, about a Cambridge academic in the early 1900s named Emily Wilde, and this is set in a fantasy world where dryadology, or the study of fairies and folk, is a recognized science, and she is a scholar in this field. She is going on a research trip to a fictional version of Iceland to document their reclusive, little-known folk for her Encyclopedia of Fairies that she's writing. When she gets there, she not only is struggling to uncover the secrets of the folk of that area, but also really struggling with the locals. Then her academic rival and only friend, Wendell Bambleby, shows up, and not all is as it seems with Wendell. Or maybe it's exactly as it seems. I love this book so much. It had me, like, kicking my feet at one point. I think I literally giggled in delight when I was reading it. Was it perfect? No, I don't think it was perfect, but sometimes you just get that feeling when you're reading a book that it's like, despite the imperfections, this book is perfect for me. There's like a lot of footnotes because it's written as like journal entries about her trip. And so she creates these like footnotes to reference other academics who are of course fictional because this field does not exist in real life. I was in awe the entire time of Heather Fawcett's writing and the amount of world building and planning that would have gone into this, and yet also super immersed in the story. It was so good. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in my June reading wrap up, so again, make sure you're subscribed. But for now, I am definitely happy to say it is the best book I've read so far this year. Next up, what's the best sequel I've read so far this year? And this is easily Thunderhead by Neil Shusterman, which is the second book in the Arc of a Scythe series. I've read another sort of subsequent book in a series that I liked more, a couple in fact, but I chose this one as the best sequel because I think it did everything a sequel is meant to do, and especially one that's part of a trilogy. It was better than the first book. It expanded the story while also leaning into the parts of the world and the story from the first book that I loved most. If you're not familiar with this series, it is set in a distant future where humanity is governed by this benevolent AI called the Thunderhead, who has solved all kinds of problems and basically runs everything in the world perfectly, and also has happened to solve mortality. So basically, people don't die anymore. And sort of as a response to that, this organization called the Scythes has formed sort of hundreds or maybe even thousands of years earlier. And the Scythes are people who, I guess, perpetuate mortality. They're not curbing population control, but they're just kind of keeping an air of mortality about humanity by gleaning. In the first book, we're following 2 apprentice Scythes called Rowan and Sidra up until they finish the program. Can't think of a way of saying that would be both accurate and spoiler free. Whatever, you get the idea. The second book then picks up where the first book left off, but it also expands the story to focus in a lot more on kind of the politics within the Scythedom, as well as how that interacts with the Thunderhead, who is this entity who has become more than just a robot. It is a true AI in the sense that we still in our time don't know. And this book had twists and things that made me absolutely gasp. I wouldn't say twists is the wrong word. It's not like gotcha. It's more like just shocking events. Definitely the best of the trilogy. New release I haven't read yet. I have a few. I'm looking up at a big stack of them right now, actually. But the one that I'm most excited to read from that stack is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. I have been trying to avoid reviews of it, so I haven't actually seen anything about it yet because I want to just go into it fresh. My most anticipated for the second half of the year, I left blank, so I have to think about that one for a second. Honestly, my pre-order list for the end of the year is looking real slim. I mean, this would be a great place to plug my book. You've got Chainmail, which is out on the 15th of August. But if we're talking about what I want to read, there's one called The Nature of Disappearing by Kimmy Cunningham Grant that I have bookmarked as interesting, and I think that's a wilderness thriller. I've not let myself pre-order anything this year that isn't from an author that I already know and love, but I have bookmarked it so that hopefully when the library orders it, I can go on the wait list. For number 5, we have Biggest Disappointment. And I really struggled with this one because there were a lot of books that I've read and disliked, but I think the biggest disappointment for me was probably Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Not because it was a bad book. I think I gave it 3 stars, but it just wasn't great. I didn't like it in the way that I did Part of Your World or Yours Truly, which are the 2 preceding books in the series. They're standalones, but like they're a series. I didn't think that the premise of the book really made a lot of sense. And I also felt like the tie-ins to other Abby Jimenez books were a bit gratuitous and done in a way that, like, despite the fact that it was marketed as like a standalone with tie-in, you really need to have read those other books in order for a lot of this to make any kind of sense. Yeah, I was quite disappointed in that one. I loved Yours Truly so much last year that I was champing at the bit to read Just for the Summer. I read it almost as soon as it arrived, and I was very disappointed. I don't know. I'll be interested to see what she comes out with next year. Then we have Biggest Surprise, which I do think for me was the Arc of the Scythe series by Neil Shusterman. I was really desperate for a science fiction or fantasy trilogy or duology that I could get really excited about, and this definitely delivered. It's really interesting because it is science fiction, but it kind of toes that line between science fiction and fantasy in the sense that it's so far future and there's so many interesting differences between the realities of that world and the reality of our world today that it almost feels like fantasy. The world building is definitely like fantasy-esque. So it kind of scratched that itch for me. I also don't usually like YA, and this is technically a YA series. It didn't feel very YA. The first one did, the second 2 did not. New favorite author, I really struggled with this one. I don't feel comfortable saying Neil Shusterman is my new favorite author because that's all I've read by him. Same with like Heather Fawcett, for example. I've only read Emily Wilde. So all of the books that I've really loved are by new authors to me. So I can't say I have a new favorite author. But I think that seeing the level of craft that went into Emily Wilde, Heather Fawcett definitely could become a favorite author of mine and someone that I would look up to in that sense. It was a really, really impressive book. New fictional crush. This is where the Emily Henry comes in. If you are not new to this channel, you might be surprised that we haven't talked about Emily Henry yet in a mid-year book freakout tag. I loved Miles from Funny Story so much. He is like such a golden retriever of a man, but like so sexy as well. His little patchwork tattoos and his scruffy hair and his sad songs. So great. It was not my favorite Emily Henry book overall, but I think he might be my favorite Emily Henry love interest. My newest favorite character, on the other hand, is definitely Wendell Bamblebee from Emily Wilde. There were a couple of things that he said. So there was one point in the book, and I'm going to share this without spoiling anything. Like I said, it's her like journal entries. And there's one point where he has to take over journaling for her. And there's a couple of things that he writes that just truly had me kicking my feet. He is so wonderful and so absurd. So absurd. Such a caricature and yet just so lovely. I cannot wait for more of him in book 2. Number 10, book that made you cry. And that is definitely going to be Record of a Spaceborne Few by Becky Chambers. This is the 3rd book in the Wayfarer series. And it is set on board the Exodin fleet, which is a fleet of homesteader spaceships that hundreds of years ago were created to transport humans away from a dying Earth and find another place to call home. But instead, they ended up finding the Galactic Confederation, which has loads of different types of aliens. And humanity, a lot of them have basically chosen to remain on these spaceships, just sort of in perpetual orbit. And as a result, they've developed all of these customs and these rituals and traditions that are super touching. This was a really slow and quiet book, but it came together in a really emotionally impactful way. I talked about this in my May wrap up, and I almost started crying just in the wrap up, thinking about how impactful the end was for me. It was really unexpected to me. I'm not really a crier in books, and I think probably last year I didn't have anything to share for this one. I don't remember. I'll have to go back and look, but this one definitely made me cry. It was very moving. Book that made me happy. Funny Story and Emily Wilde, both of them. That's kind of old news at this point in this video. Favorite book to movie adaptation. I really struggled because I actually don't know that I've seen any that I knew were adaptations. I mean, I rewatched Little Women, if that counts, but I've never actually read the book of that. I really want to watch The Three-Body Problem, but I haven't yet. Favorite post or video. If we're talking about favorite poster video of mine, I think that would be the upload of my session at the Bournemouth Writing Festival, which is about how to outline a book. I put a lot of work into that session and I'm really proud of it. It's a long video. It's like an hour long, but I think it's really good, really full of very practical, useful information. There's links to templates, stuff like that. If we're talking about other people's videos, I can't think of any particular videos, but there's someone that I've been subscribed to for a while, Harriet Scriven. Her username is Scrivspo, and she has just made the move into BookTube, and I am absolutely loving that. She's one of my favorite creators. Most beautiful book. I think that there's a few different ways to interpret this. There's most beautiful cover, most beautiful writing, and the most beautiful story. So if we're talking about the most beautiful cover, I've not read a ton of beautiful covered books this year, but I really like the cover for Savor It by Tara DeWitt, which I just read. I think it's really pretty and really romantic looking. So maybe that one. If we're talking about the most beautiful writing, that's definitely Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I mean, Claire Keegan can fucking write, and I think we all knew that. And if we're talking about the most beautiful story, I think that would be A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers, which is the second book in the Monk and Robot duology by her. I really loved that story, and I loved kind of the way that it came together in the second novella. I would love more from that story, but I think it's just so wholesome and just so human, very quiet and close, the way that the book from the Wayfarer series was that I was talking about, but again, very impactful, very beautiful, very moving. And then finally, we have books I need to read by the end of the year. And like I said when I was talking about my Goodreads goal, I've tried to really release myself from too many expectations around having to read certain things, having to read a certain number of books, having to read certain new releases. That said, I've got a lot of pre-orders that I haven't read yet. Like I said, The Paradise Problem and Here We Go Again by Alison Cochrane, The Honey Witch by Sydney Shields, Silence Factory by Bridget Collins, the new Veronica Roth. There's quite a few pre-orders that I would really like to get to. And then I actually have a lot of these books on my shelves that I haven't read yet, so there's a lot of possibility. What I have started doing is posting monthly TBR videos. That's new for me. I say I've started posting monthly ones. I've done one so far, but I will be doing them monthly. So again, make sure you're subscribed if you want to see that. But that's where I'll be sort of creating my menu of options for the coming month. And that's it. That's the mid-year book freakout tag. And I would love to see yours as well. Maybe answer the questions for yourself in the comments. I will put them in the description so that you can just copy and paste them into the comments if you want. I especially want to know which character you have a crush on now, because that's always my favorite. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.